Hi, my name is Mari Murtanen. On this video, we will take a closer look on learning outcomes, meaning what they are, where the concept comes from, and how can learning outcomes be used in our own teaching. The concept of learning outcomes has been used much in higher education during the last 10 to 15 years. According to the Tuning Project, that is a project driven by the European universities, the learning outcomes are defined as statements of what a learner is expected to know, understand, and be able to demonstrate after completion of a learning experience. Learning outcomes are expressed in terms of the level of competence to be obtained by the learner. Competencies represent a dynamic combination of cognitive and metacognitive skills, knowledge and understanding, interpersonal, intellectual and practical skills, and ethical values. In Europe, a process called the Bologna process started in 1999 in order to create a European higher education area. To foster the mobility of students between universities, there was a need to be able to compare educational programs of different universities in different countries. To be able to compare, measurability was needed. In addition to being comparable and measurable, there was a requirement for education to be comprehensible, meaning that the students, teachers, and working life could understand what the students had studied and, more importantly, what they had learned. In other words, with competencies they possess after education. For these purposes, the concept of learning outcomes was taken in use. Soon, the concept of learning outcomes became very popular in European universities because it offered a tool to describe the goals of the courses more clearly. Many universities adopted the concept to be able to describe the learning outcomes of courses and whole programs. However, there is a problem with the concept of learning outcomes related to its history. The term learning outcome was first used among the behaviorist tradition in the 1960s. The original meaning was to clearly state the desired learning outcomes and then to observe if these were obtained. In behaviorism, the functions of mind and thinking were thought to be so hard to study that they were not included in research at all. Only observable behavior was counted. The criticism of behaviorism stated that observable learning outcomes were too narrow for many educational purposes. Also, today's understanding of learning is not in line with the behaviorist view. Instead, learning is thought to be much broader, understanding and development of expertise. Thus, clear, narrowly stated and observable learning outcomes do not represent the broad idea of learning. The possible pitfalls for learning outcomes are thus such as too narrow definitions, meaning that clear definitions can be too detailed, leaving no room for broad understanding. They can also restrict innovativeness. University education should be about creating new ideas and helping society to progress. Defining goals in advance can inhibit the creation of new ideas. A possible problem is also the outdated goals. Defining today the goals for master's program, for example, means that when the students get ready, meaning that when they reach the goals, those have been set many years ago. How then to benefit the learning outcomes? When defining learning outcomes, we have to think about the scope of our learning goals. It means that if we want our students to learn something quite clear and uncomplicated, we can set very clear and strictly defined learning outcomes. However, if we want them to learn something broader and develop more complex expertise, we have to be careful that we don't define the learning outcomes too strictly. Generic skills can be implemented in teaching in three ways. In the unconscious model, if asked, the teachers can state some generic skills that they hope their students will learn during their education, but these are not explicated anywhere and nobody really knows what the students are learning. In the separate model, generic skills are taught on separate courses, for example statistics course that is not connected to discipline-specific questions, which may cause some problems. In the integrative model, generic skills are taught together with the substance content. For example, a language course is integrated to, for example, an economic course. This is the best way to teach generic skills. Learning outcomes are good in making our goals visible. When defining learning outcomes, try to be clear and informative about what you think that the students should know and be able to do after your teaching. However, remember also not to create too narrow learning outcomes so that you don't restrict students' creativeness and innovativeness.